So what I wanted to do is let's just have this conversation, especially for those of you that are kind of new to DFY and what it is we do. Here's one thing we've kind of come to realize, right? When it comes to retirement, there's generally two things you don't get to choose. Do you know what they are? What are the two things you generally don't get to choose when it comes to retirement? Any ideas?
When to retire, when you're going to retire.
When you're going to retire. Yep. What else? When you want to retire. Usually it's sort of put upon you, or if you're like my dad's awesome, but he worked so long into his 70s because he just didn't have the option to be able to retire at 65. There was no pension that was there, so he didn't get to really choose the time when he wanted to retire. What's the other thing that maybe we don't always get to choose when it comes to that time? Yes?
How long you're going to live afterwards.
Oh yeah, how long you're going to live afterwards? That's true. We don't get to, but I wish we could just write in a box, let's do 25. We'll just do, actually make it 40. Yeah, we don't get to do that. You're right. That's not what I'm going to show you here in a second, but that is something that's very, very important. And hold on real quick. Let me just say this. Why do you think I'm talking about retirement? None of us here are ready to go into a senior home. So why are we even having the discussion of retirement? If you're a millennial, why do you need to be talking about retirement? Jason, what do you think?
Because they didn't talk about it 20 years ago.
Yeah, for those of you at home, Jason says, because they didn't talk about it 20 years ago. And here's the deal. It's an inevitability. Retirement doesn't just mean 65. It means picking the time when you want to sort of live the life you've kind of desired. And that's one thing you often don't get to choose. And what goes along with that is you usually don't get to choose the income you want to earn while you're retired. It's, hey, here's your Social Security, or hey, here's your pension. My mom worked for the school district for a long time. Here's your pension. That's what it is. She didn't get to pick it. That's what was given to her. Social Security, you don't get to write into the Social Security office and say, hey, I was looking for a raise. What do you think? Can we just up that 25%? It doesn't work that way. And so these two things, being able to decide when you want to retire and the income you want to have when you retire, are vital. And for most people, you don't get to choose either. With DFY, you get to choose both. When we talk about redefining your retirement, it's very simple. Here's what we want to do. We want you to understand that the numbers are in, and we know that traditional retirement planning just plain doesn't work. IRAs and 401ks, even when they're screaming through the roof like they are right now, anytime that happens, what's the eventuality? Yeah. And it's sort of this roller coaster. So it's great while it's going good, but there's no guarantees. And I'll talk about something else here in just a couple minutes of why we think that real estate is perhaps the better option when looking to retirement. There's a variety of things. Actually, there's this, I'm going to show all you guys how to get this infographic that's really cool. There's 4 things on here specifically. What I did here is we put real estate up against Bitcoin because everybody's talking about Bitcoin, and real estate up against the stock market, and there's 4 reasons real estate's better than both combined. So we'll mention that briefly. But in reality, this idea of time to redefine is, look, you are where you are, so let's get you to where you want to go. Because the old way just plain doesn't work. In fact, I'll show you this here. I'm going to skip over this. This right here is what I want to show you. This is actually a graph. This is some recent information, and here's what you need to know about this. Nearly 80% of Americans preparing for retirement lack sufficient retirement funds. Does that scare anybody, by the way? It's a lot. 80% of us are not on track. So the only thing we're trying to ultimately arrive at is this kind of idea of financial freedom, which is just real simple. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it. It's just the idea that your investments or your residual income can outpace your expenses, right? Does that make sense? Financial freedom, ultimately, it's not necessarily a number from the standpoint of you must have 250 grand a year. It's just, what are your expenses? How do we get enough residual income to be more than expenses? And if that's where you can get to, that's where real financial peace is found, right? Does that make sense? So the whole thing that real estate allows us to do is play a little bit of catch up, because real estate gives us the ability to generate some cash flow. So to give you an idea on numbers, a lot of times people don't really, we talk about retirement's not working. Well, here's an idea. So if you make $100,000 a year, if you make $100,000 a year and you're going to retire at age 65 and you want to maintain your current standard of living, How much money will you need to have come age 65 to maintain that current standard of living? Little over $1.4 million. Okay, now here's what that means. If you currently have 200 grand in the bank and you are saving 10% of your income and you have 20 more years to work, you're still only going to be at $837,000. If you have 20 years to work, you already have 200 grand and you're saving 10% of your income, you're still only going to be here, which is almost half of what you need in order to maintain that current standard of living. Does that make sense, everybody?